She spent her last $20 on a freezing boy. The next morning, a black SUV stopped in front of her house. Before we begin, take a second to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Every story here is inspired by the power of kindness, hope, and second chances. Your support helps us bring more unforgettable stories to life. Are you absolutely sure about this? Emily Carter slowly placed the pen on the desk and looked at the bank manager. One signature. That was all it took to erase 15 years of her life. The little house she and her late husband had built together no longer belonged to her. After his sudden death, the mortgage became her responsibility alone. She worked as an elementary school teacher. She tutored children after school. She graded homework late into the night. She skipped vacations and counted every dollar. Still, it wasn't enough. The bank had waited for almost 2 years. Today was the final deadline. "I'm sorry," the manager whispered. Emily forced a smile. She had heard those words too many times. Friends said they were sorry. Neighbors said they were sorry. Even the movers who carried away her furniture apologized. But apologies couldn't save a home. Everything she still owned fit inside one old backpack. A sweater, a few family photographs, a children's storybook, and a small wooden clock her husband had carved by hand on their first wedding anniversary. She boarded the last bus leaving Chicago for the tiny rural town where her grandmother's abandoned cottage still stood. Outside, snow covered the roads. The passengers stared at their phones. No one noticed the woman quietly wiping away tears beside the window. After 3 hours, the bus stopped at an isolated gas station. People rushed inside for coffee. Emily stepped out just to stretch her legs. That's when she saw him. A little boy, maybe 10 years old, sat beside an ice-covered vending machine. His sneakers were soaked. His jacket was far too thin for the freezing weather. He wasn't begging. He wasn't crying. He simply watched strangers walk past him as if he didn't exist. Emily slowly walked over. "Are you here alone?" The boy nodded. "Where are your parents?" "They're coming." His voice was almost silent, but she knew immediately he was lying. She opened her wallet. Inside was exactly $20. The last money she had until she could somehow find another job. She could buy groceries, firewood, or blankets. Instead, she walked into the store. A few minutes later, she returned, carrying hot chicken soup, fresh bread, hot chocolate, and a thick wool blanket. She placed everything beside him. "This is for you." The boy looked confused. "Why?" Emily smiled. "Because no child should be cold." For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then he quietly whispered, "Thank you." Those 2 words somehow sounded heavier than anything she had heard in years. The bus driver honked. Emily hurried away. Just before climbing aboard, she heard the boy call out, "What's your name?" She turned around. "Emily." He smiled for the first time. "I'll remember that." She waved goodbye. She believed she would never see him again. She couldn't possibly know that this small act of kindness was about to change her entire life. If this story already touches your heart, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Stories like this remind us that even the smallest act of kindness can create miracles. The next morning, Emily woke up inside her grandmother's old cottage. The roof leaked, the fireplace barely worked, the walls were cracked with age. Still, it was the only place she had left. As she tried to light the fire, someone knocked on the front door. 3 sharp knocks. When she opened it, she froze. A brand new black SUV was parked outside. 2 men in suits stood beside it. Between them was a tall, gray-haired gentleman whose tired eyes revealed many sleepless nights. "Are you Emily Carter?" "Yes." He took a slow breath. "You helped a little boy yesterday." Her heart skipped. "Is he all right?" The man smiled for the first time. "Because of you, he is." He extended his hand. "My name is Andrew Brooks, and I believe I owe you far more than a simple thank you." Emily had no idea that this unexpected visitor would return something she thought she had lost forever. Not her house, not her money, but something far more valuable. A family. Stay with us until the end, because the secret hidden inside an old wooden box will reveal a truth that no one saw coming, and it will change every life in this story forever. Andrew didn't rush to speak. Instead, he looked around the tiny cottage. Peeling paint, an old wooden table, a fireplace struggling to keep the room warm. One worn backpack sitting quietly in the corner. He noticed everything. "So, this is where you've been living?" Emily nodded. "It's enough." Andrew looked at the empty shelves. "No, it isn't." Before she could answer, another door opened. The little boy stepped inside. The moment he saw Emily, his face lit up. "She's here!" He ran toward her and stopped just inches away, almost as if he wasn't sure he was allowed to hug her. Emily smiled first. That was all the permission he needed. He wrapped his arms around her. Andrew watched silently. For the last 3 weeks, his nephew hadn't smiled, had barely eaten, had refused to speak to doctors, police officers, or even family members at a gas station. The frightened child seemed alive again. "My name is Max," the boy whispered. "I'm Emily." "I know." He smiled. "I told you I'd remember." For the first time in months, Andrew felt something he thought he had lost. Hope. Andrew reached into his briefcase and placed a white envelope on the kitchen table. "I want you to have this." Emily didn't touch it. "What is it?" "A small thank you." She opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check. $50,000. Her hands immediately pulled away. "I can't accept this." "You saved my nephew." "I bought him soup." "You gave him something nobody else did." "What?" Andrew looked toward Max. "You stopped and saw him." Emily slowly pushed the envelope back across the table. "If I accept money, then kindness becomes a transaction." Silence filled the room. Andrew had negotiated billion-dollar contracts. He had built one of the largest construction companies in the country. He had met politicians, celebrities, and investors. But he had never met someone who refused $50,000 without hesitation. Max quietly smiled. I told you she was different. Over the next few days, Andrew kept finding excuses to visit the cottage. Sometimes Max wanted to feed the chickens. Sometimes he wanted to help chop firewood. Sometimes he simply wanted to sit on the porch beside Emily and listen to her read old children's books. Little by little, the fear disappeared from his eyes. One snowy afternoon, they were building a snowman. Max suddenly asked, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you never yell?" Emily laughed softly. "Should I?" He looked down. "Most adults do." The smile disappeared from her face. She knelt beside him. "You never have to earn kindness." The boy stared at her for several seconds. Then he quietly admitted something he had never told anyone. "I didn't get lost." Emily looked at him carefully. "I ran away." Andrew stopped shoveling snow. "What do you mean?" Max swallowed hard. "I heard two men talking." "What did they say?" "They said—" His small voice almost disappeared. "That if I disappeared, the company would belong to someone else." The yard became completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Andrew slowly stood up. "Max?" "I wasn't supposed to hear them. I got scared, so I ran." Emily looked at Andrew. Neither of them needed to say a word. This wasn't a frightened child's imagination. Someone had wanted Max gone. That evening, Andrew called his attorney. Within hours, investigators began reviewing financial records inside Brooks Construction. Millions of dollars had quietly disappeared over the last 2 years. Fake companies, hidden accounts, forged signatures. Someone inside the business had been planning this for a long time. Andrew looked across the room. Max had fallen asleep on the couch with his head resting against Emily's shoulder. For the first time since his sister died, the boy looked peaceful. Andrew quietly whispered, "I don't know why he trusts you so much." Emily smiled without looking up. "Maybe because I expected nothing from him." Andrew stared into the fireplace. He suddenly realized something surprising. For years, he had spent millions trying to create security for his family. Yet a woman who had lost everything had given his nephew something money never could: a feeling of home. If you're enjoying this story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You never know which story might restore someone's faith in people or remind you that one simple act of kindness can change an entire lifetime. The next morning, while cleaning the attic, Emily discovered an old wooden box that had belonged to her grandmother. Inside were faded photographs, a small golden pendant, and a sealed letter that had remained unopened for more than 20 years. Neither Emily nor Andrew could imagine that what was written inside would expose a family secret powerful enough to destroy a conspiracy and give Max the family he never believed he would have. Andrew carefully opened the faded envelope. The paper inside had turned yellow with age. Someone had folded it decades ago and never expected it to be read until the right moment. At the bottom of the page was a signature: Sophia Brooks, Max's mother. Andrew's hands began to shake. I haven't seen her handwriting in 15 years. Emily quietly sat beside him. Max looked from one adult to the other without saying a word. Andrew slowly began reading aloud. If you are reading this letter, then fate has done what I always prayed for. Maybe I am no longer here. Maybe my son is old enough to understand that money can build houses, but never homes. If Max finds this letter, I want him to know one thing. Never trust a person because they are rich. Trust the one who shares their last piece of bread. Emily lowered her eyes. Andrew continued. 20 years ago, I got lost during a snowstorm while traveling through this county. My car slid off the road. I thought I would die. An elderly woman found me and took me into her tiny cottage. She had almost nothing, yet she gave me her dinner, her blanket, and even her own boots so I could reach safety. Her name was Margaret Carter. Emily stopped breathing. Margaret. Her grandmother. The letter continued. I offered her money. She refused. She smiled and said something I have never forgotten. If you really want to repay me, help someone else when they need it most. From that day on, I promised myself that kindness would always matter more than wealth. Andrew looked at Emily. Neither of them spoke. Max slowly reached for her hand. A second envelope slipped from inside the box. This one contained photographs. In the first picture, Margaret stood outside the old cottage with a young, pregnant woman, Sophia. In another picture, they were laughing while planting a tiny apple tree beside the house. Emily walked outside. The tree was still there, now tall and strong, covered with snow. Her grandmother had never mentioned any of this. 3 days later, Brooks Construction held its annual shareholders meeting. Every executive was present. Television cameras waited outside. The chairman, Victor Harrison, entered confidently. He smiled at reporters. Within an hour, he expected complete control of the company. He had spent years secretly buying shares through shell corporations. No one suspected him. Or so he believed. Andrew entered the room. Emily and Max sat quietly in the front row. Victor noticed them and smiled. A school teacher? He whispered to another executive. This should be entertaining. The meeting began. Financial reports appeared on the giant screen. Then Andrew interrupted. I have one final presentation. The lights dimmed. Instead of charts, security footage appeared. Secret meetings, hidden bank transfers, recorded phone calls. Victor's smile disappeared. Then everyone heard his own voice. If the boy disappears, everything belongs to us. Silence. Complete silence. One shareholder slowly stood up. Then another. Then another. Victor grabbed the microphone. This is manipulated. Before anyone could answer, someone unexpected entered the room. It was Sergey Lawson, the former bank executive, the man Emily believed had destroyed her life. He walked directly to the front. I was there. Every camera turned toward him. I refused to participate. I kept copies of every document. And today, I am giving them to the authorities. Police officers entered moments later. Victor tried to leave. He never reached the door. The news spread across the country. The billionaire conspiracy. The missing heir. The teacher who changed everything by buying soup for a freezing child. Television stations wanted interviews. Publishers offered book deals. Emily politely declined them all. She returned to the little cottage, because that was where she felt at peace. Months later, Brooks Family Foundation announced a new project. Not another skyscraper, not another luxury development. Instead, they restored abandoned schools, built libraries, created emergency shelters for children. The project had one simple name: Margaret's Promise. On opening day, hundreds of families gathered outside the first community center. Andrew stepped onto the stage. I spent my life believing success was measured by money. He looked toward Emily. I was wrong. Max took the microphone. Thousands watched the live broadcast. He smiled nervously. When I met Emily, he paused. She didn't know my last name. She didn't know my family owned a company. She didn't know I might inherit millions. She only knew one thing. I was cold. Many people in the audience wiped away tears. Before we finish today's story, leave a comment and tell us, what would you have done if you had only $20 left and met a freezing child? If stories like this remind you that kindness still exists in the world, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a like. Because every week, we share stories that prove one simple truth. The richest people are not the ones who have the most. They're the ones who are willing to give away the little they have. And sometimes, one bowl of hot soup, one warm blanket, and $20 can build a family that lasts forever.